Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's talk for the International Congress of Zookeepers webinar series. My name is Lohwana Halaq from the Philippine Eagle Foundation, and today I will be presenting on Philippine eagle conservation breeding, with a focus on the importance of mate surrogacy with human-imprinted Philippine eagles as part of our captive breeding program. I will be drawing from my own experience being a Philippine eagle keeper. So some of the questions that I will be addressing throughout the talk will include: how do Philippine eagle keepers stimulate their charges throughout Philippine eagle breeding season? What are some of the courtship behaviors that keepers need to simulate in order to forge a strong bond or connection with their eagle? And what are the challenges of breeding Philippine eagles in captivity? So without further ado, let us continue. I have here a prepared PowerPoint presentation that will provide some visual context to what I'm talking about. First, I will give a quick overview about the Philippine Eagle Foundation, who we are, what we do, and how we contribute to Philippine eagle conservation. The Philippine Eagle Foundation is the only breeding and rehabilitation facility in the world for the critically endangered bird of prey, the Philippine eagle. The Foundation's primary conservation mission is to ensure the survival of the species, its habitat, and the biodiversity they represent. The center itself is located in Davao, Philippines, on the island of Mindanao, one of 4 islands of which the natural populations of Philippine eagles can be found. So this here is Philippine eagle CNUG. He is one of the Philippine eagles under my care. He is currently 5 years old, and I have been with him since he was about 1 year old. So we have developed quite a strong bond over the years. CNUG is considered one of our human-imprinted Philippine eagles as part of our captive breeding program. However, since CNUG has yet to reach age of sexual maturity to actively participate in our captive breeding efforts, he is considered our ambassador bird for his species. So with that, I am able to take him out of his enclosure, train him, and even utilize him in some of our on-site education programs through animal keeper talks. As for me, I am part of our captive breeding department, and our department is in charge of propagating Philippine eagles in captive settings to eventually augment wild populations as part of a future reintroduction and release program into the wild. So we breed, incubate, chick rear, and then eventually be part of the release programs. Some quick facts about the Philippine eagle: they are considered to be one of the largest birds of prey species in the world, with a wingspan of about 7 feet wide, equivalent to being 2 meters in length, and being about 3 feet in height, equivalent to being 1 meter tall. This species can range in weight between 3 to 8 kilos, with males on the smaller side with weighing about 3 to 5 kilos, and for females 5 to 8. This species is unfortunately classified as critically endangered, with an estimate of less than 1,000 individuals remaining in the wild. Philippine eagles are solitary creatures until they reach the age of sexual maturity and go in search of a mate. Oftentimes, these solitary eagles are referred to as floaters. So typically immature eagles that have already fledged the nest, but do not yet have an established territory or are in search of a territory. Philippine eagles are extremely territorial animals. They are the apex predator in their environment, and so their apex status is reflective in their territorial displays, especially towards their nesting sites. Philippine eagles have a strong sense of nest site fidelity. They are very loyal to their nesting tree and will revisit and reuse the same nest each breeding season. Philippine eagles require about 4,000 to 11,000 hectares of forest. This is for a single pair of Philippine eagles in order to thrive and survive in. This will include not only their nest site, but also their hunting grounds. So you can imagine with the deforestation pressures that these eagles face, and also the human-induced disturbances that these eagles also face, their forest habitat continues to shrink significantly. So the lifespan of a Philippine eagle, they can reach up to 40 plus years in captivity. Our oldest Philippine eagle, her name was Thor, and she reached the age of 48 years. So yes, they do have a very long lifespan. This may be different, of course, in the wild, where they do face different environmental pressures that affect their survival. What contributes to the decline of the Philippine eagle? The Philippine eagle wild population is threatened daily by human-induced disturbances. This will include poaching pressures via shooting and trapping, habitat loss via deforestation, through logging and mining and farming, and of course human persecution. This will include human encroachment into the natural forest habitat of the Philippine eagles. So what are we doing to save the Philippine eagle? The Philippine Eagle Foundation takes on a holistic approach to Philippine eagle conservation and is organized into the following divisions. So we have conservation education, field research conservation, our community-based initiatives, and our conservation breeding department, which includes our captive breeding program. Our conservation education programs focuses on raising awareness on the plight of the Philippine eagle species and its dwindling populations. It engages with the public to partake in the conservation actions and aims to influence the people to appreciate and protect the Philippine eagle and its natural habitat. The Philippine eagle is the national bird of the Philippines, and so it is important that our education programs promote and increase a sense of understanding and appreciation for our Philippine wildlife. And we are able to spread this message through various means, such as through our urban-based campaigns, so promotions in malls and schools and universities, and even through documentary movie screenings. And then we have our community outreach programs in which our education officers go out into the field or into the local communities that share the same forest home as our Philippine eagles and spread the message about Philippine eagle conservation. And then, of course, we have our center-based activities or our center-based learning here at the Philippine Eagle Center via our open classroom projects that targets the youth, and also through our Raptors in Flight demonstration and our animal keeper talks. So featured here in this photo, you can see Philippine Eagle CNUG in flight. Philippine Eagle CNUG, as I mentioned earlier, is our ambassador bird for his species. And I became the first woman in history to flight train the Philippine eagle using falconry methods and bring to fruition this Raptors in Flight educational demonstration. So which aims to educate the public and our visitors and guests about Philippine eagle conservation. And then we have our field research department, in which our researchers go out into the field and conduct eagle nest surveys and also perform eagle monitoring with our released eagles. And then we have our community-based initiatives, in which forages local and indigenous community partnerships, such as featured here with one of our communities, in which the women of the community create these handmade plushies, and that we sell here at our gift shop at the Philippine Eagle Center. And then the proceeds from that go back into the local communities that share that same forest habitat with our Philippine eagles. And then, of course, we have here our conservation breeding department, in which breed, incubate, hatch, and chick rear our Philippine eagles, and then eventually release them back into the wild. The conservation breeding program utilizes two main methods of captive breeding, one of which is our natural pairing method, whereby a male and a female Philippine eagle are paired based on the assessment of compatibility behaviors to one another and can organically reproduce on their own without human intervention. Our second method, via cooperative artificial insemination techniques, or also known as our CAI method, uses human-imprinted Philippine eagles and mates surrogacy with their keeper. Utilizing both methods of captive breeding allows us to maximize our efforts of breeding the species. Before further explanation of our CAI method using human-imprinted Philippine eagles, I shall describe our natural pairing process. This will provide some background context as to why we distinguish between the two methods. So our natural breeder candidates must undergo a testing period, otherwise referred to as our pairing attempt process. This period of observation will allow us to assess the eagles' displays of compatibility before we allow them to share one enclosure as a confirmed natural pair. The eagles are introduced to one another via conjoined enclosures that share a partition screen separating the male and the female, as you can see here in this photo. The partition barrier allows the eagles to freely exhibit courtship behaviors, but prevents the eagles from causing physical harm and or injury to one another. If we were to introduce both eagles together in one enclosure right away, there's a significant possibility for them to attack one another. As I mentioned before, these eagles can be very aggressive and territorial, especially in the initial introduction phase. The safety and the health of our eagles are always our top priority, so underestimating their behavior can result in extreme injury or death to an eagle. There is little margin for error when pairing these eagles, so a successful pairing attempt should be observed for the duration of one breeding season. For a successful evaluation, what we are looking for in terms of behaviors between the eagles would be the absence of any displays of aggression towards their potential mate. So some aggressive behaviors that are not deemed compatible for the Philippine eagles would include any forms of attacks, whether that is a screen grab towards the partition barrier, hence why we have it in place to protect the eagles from actually physically harming each other. We could see in this video clip here that an eagle flew to the nest edge and then displayed wing arc, followed with another eagle on the other side, showcasing its wings. So these two eagles are not displaying signs of compatibility and are rather hyper vigilant towards one another. So during, as I mentioned, that introduction phase, the eagles would be initially quite aggressive to one another. If it so happens that they remain aggressive towards one another throughout the remaining period of their pairing attempt process, then the pairing attempt would not be deemed compatible and would then be terminated. However, signs of compatibility that we do want to see between our eagles is that we want them to be calm in front of each other. We want them to display the different courtship behaviors that a natural pair would do in the wild. And so that would include sprig delivery behaviors, nest building behaviors via their shared nest platform. However, they do it independently until they are in one enclosure, but to see them initiate nest building behaviors and even trying to offer twigs to one another is a good sign of being compatible. And so in this video clip here, it's just there is no signs of aggression, absence of cresting, absence of wing arcs and wing slaps. So the progression of this pair happens to be showing positive signs. And so when they do show these types of positive signs, then we are able to allow them to enter one enclosure. So after the eagles have been assessed as compatible, the pair are moved into one shared enclosure in isolation, so away from any human disturbances, including keeper contact. This is where the eagles can freely exhibit their natural breeding behaviors free from the public eye. As much as these eagles are territorial and aggressive, they are also highly susceptible to stress and disturbances. So especially during breeding season activities, any distractions or disruptions may result in a delayed breeding cycle or missed opportunities for copulation. So a confirmed natural pair of Philippine eagles will exhibit courtship and breeding behaviors reliably each breeding season. And in this video clip here is an example of a confirmed natural pairing. You can hear the copulation vocals issued by the male and the female being responsive and allowing the male to mount her. This result is what we look for in a successful pairing attempt. And hopefully this confirmed pair would produce a fertile egg naturally. So in the natural breeding method, keepers were indirectly involved in the breeding process of the Philippine eagles. However, for the second method of cooperative artificial insemination, the keepers become directly involved in the breeding. Philippine eagles will only bond to one keeper as they would bond to one mate naturally in the wild. Keepers become the surrogate partner or mate to their eagle. Keepers are then able to collect semen samples from their male charges to artificially inseminate a human imprinted female. So since these human imprinted eagles cooperate willingly in either the semen extraction from the males and the insemination process with the females, this is why the method is referred to as cooperative artificial insemination. So this rare method of captive breeding is only achieved because of the bond the eagle shares with their keeper. So eagle candidates that are involved in this method of captive breeding are typically eagles that have some form of defect that inhibits natural breeding. So for example, physical injuries and or behavioral anomalies that results in the Philippine eagle unable to procreate with a natural mate of its own species. This here is my second human imprinted Philippine eagle named Fighter. Unlike Philippine eagle CNUG, who is still young, Fighter is now of breeding age. So this here is his backstory. Fighter was just a year old when he was rescued from the wild because of a gunshot wound. He was a victim of human persecution. He was brought to the Philippine Eagle Foundation for treatment. However, his injury was so severe that his left wing had to be amputated in order for him to survive. This made Fighter unable to fly or hunt on his own. So rendering him unfit for release, Fighter became a permanent resident at the Philippine Eagle Center. Currently, Fighter has now reached the age of sexual maturity and is one of our candidate semen donors for cooperative artificial insemination. So unable to naturally pair with a female of his own species due to his disability, this is why Philippine Eagle Fighter could not become a candidate for our natural pairing method. Despite his disability, Fighter allowed our companionship to thrive. You can see clearly here in these photos that he is missing his left wing. He does struggle with balance at times, but he has adapted fairly well. His enclosure is designed specifically to allow him to move around safely. Fighter had to learn how to step up onto the falconer's glove and become comfortable being on it, as the glove functions as our main tool for semen collection. It is not easy to gain the trust of a Philippine eagle, especially with an eagle that originates from the wild versus being captive bred. Wild eagles definitely retain certain wild instincts and are much more apprehensive towards humans and new environments. Fighter was not previously imprinted or bonded to any one person. Accordingly, he was quite aggressive towards his previous caretakers and would try to attack them. He would showcase different aggressive displays such as cresting, wing arcs, wing flaps, and so forth. Since Fighter was an immature eagle during the years prior and due to his impairment, he was not qualified to be part of our captive breeding program. It was not until he came under my care that he began to show positive displays of interactions with a keeper. and he was just then beginning to reach the age of sexual maturity. So we decided to try to have him be part of our breeding practices. So these photos here were taken a couple of years ago now, so during the early stages of when Fido was just learning to accept me into his territory, which is his enclosure, and to feed him off the falconer's glove. So day by day, Fido became more comfortable in my presence, and I would always give him the space he needed and never forced any interactions. So through positive reinforcement via food, Fido learned that I was a friend rather than foe, and he did not need to see me as a threat. So a significant milestone during the imprinting or bonding process was when I was able to enter Fido's enclosure without any displays of aggression or want of attack from him. Similar to the pairing attempt process in becoming a natural pair, this marked change in behavior meant that a sense of trust was being established to the point in which Fido began issuing recognition vocals and mating calls towards me whenever I entered his enclosure. So in this video clip here, if you listen carefully, you can actually hear Fido's recognition vocals. It is a soft, low-pitched beep, beep, beep sound that he makes when I enter his enclosure. It's a sign of recognition and that the bird is bonding to me. So this is Fido issuing mating vocals towards me. These vocalizations can only be heard for a few months out of the year during Philippine eagle breeding season. Both males and females will issue these vocals either towards their mate or potential mate as part of the courtship rituals. But these vocalizations are also a good indicator for when an eagle reaches age of sexual maturity. So you can see here that Fido did a feather rouse behavior, and this behavior is typically done after preening or after bathing, or when an eagle is feeling relaxed and content. What kind of courtship behaviors do keepers need to simulate to forge a strong bond and connection with their eagle? So Philippine eagle keepers will spend as much time possible with their eagles prior to breeding season, and of course enhance the amount of visits during breeding season in order to stimulate the eagles to want to breed. And so that bond that we share with the eagle becomes very important during this time of year. Those positive interactions that we have built throughout the years comes down to breeding season. And so one of the ways Philippine eagle keepers stimulate their charges is mimicking certain behaviors that a natural pair would do in the wild, since human imprinted eagles refer to their keeper as their surrogate partner or mate. And so keepers become very busy during the Philippine eagle breeding season, collecting leaves and sprigs for the eagles to build their nests with and perform the nest building activities. And this in turn will stimulate the eagles to want to breed as they would in the wild after building a nest. And so the act of bringing the leaves into the nest, even the whistle that I do for Fido, it's a recognition for him to know that I'm here and I'm present and want to showcase those certain positive interactions. And so here Fido will step up onto the glove. He has to become very comfortable with this, even though he is sometimes off balance. But the falconer's glove for specifically our male imprinted Philippine eagles is important because we utilize this as one of the tools in order for us to collect semen samples from the male. So the males will actually copulate on the glove, and that we can collect the semen samples from underneath. So another way in which keepers will stimulate their charges or to reinforce the bond is through food delivery, similar to with a natural pair, providing food for their mates. Typically the males would provide for the females and bring it to the nest. But also females can do that as well, since technically Fighter is a male here, but he accepts the food offer. He'll bring it to his nest. Some Philippine eagle pairs, they will perform the food cache behavior, in which typically the male would bring the food to the nest. The female would then come in later and eat that food that the male like hides in the nest for the female. So how do Philippine eagle keepers stimulate their charges during Philippine eagle breeding season? So again, one of the ways is really through the nest building activity. So this functions not only for stimulation, but also to reinforce the bond that we have together. So you can see here that I am placing sprigs in the nest, and I'm kind of playing with them. And then in turn, this stimulates Fighter, and he will issue these mating vocals. And then after which, nest building typically occurs. So Fighter here is still learning how to make a nest on his own. Due to his disability, he's not always able to perform it exactly like a fully physical Philippine eagle, but he does his best anyways. And so after that nest bowl is created, so similar to a natural pair, prepping their nest, and then mating typically occurs. And so for human imprinted Philippine eagles, this will happen when the male will be able to mount either our falconer's glove or another device in which we use a leather hood to be able to have the bird mount on top. So what are the challenges that keepers face with breeding Philippine eagles in captivity? So firstly, Philippine eagles are one of the largest birds of prey in the world. So they are territorial and aggressive. So safety is a concern, not only for the eagle, but for the keepers ourselves. So these are dangerous animals. So we always have to make sure that we are safe and that the eagle is safe. So anytime throughout the time we spend together, we're always aware of our surroundings, always aware of the eagle's behavior, because those are the indicators in which we have to assess whether we can we can go closer to the eagle or not. And again, that bond functions as our form of safety, because then the eagle will recognize us as being safe. So for the breeding ecology, of course, they have a very slow maturation rate, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. They do have a delayed fledgling age, and so that is 2 years in the wild. So that's a very long time for the eagles to take care of their chick until it reaches that age. And so they only lay 1 egg every 2 years. So combined with their breeding ecology and with their age of reproduction, so waiting until the eagle reaches age of maturity, is a very difficult scenario for these eagles to breed naturally in the wild. Then of course, combined with our human disturbances, they're highly susceptible to stress, and limited forest coverage and nesting sites really does make it difficult for these eagles to survive and then let alone thrive. So of course, again, their status is critically endangered, and because of all of these reasons, as mentioned above, it is difficult for their numbers to increase naturally. So that is why we here at the Philippine Eagle Foundation is trying to breed them in captivity to give them a fighting chance, so that we do not lose the species to extinction. So the center itself does have their own challenges in terms of biosecurity measures, and in terms of our neighboring properties. They can be quite loud, and that does contribute to the stress of our breeding eagles. And of course, we are a nonprofit organization, so funding also can become an issue at times when we want to be able to protect and preserve this species. So thank you very much for watching this presentation. saving eagles, protecting forests is securing our future. So thank you very much.